Well, hello, that's me again. Today is July 18th, 2025. It is Friday. Happy Friday, everybody. And what you see in the beginning is just a hint to Mr. General Donahue of what happens when you deal with the people who have a really good satellite constellation, which is, of course, has all kinds of the optronic capabilities, and then you have the ability of the use this ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. And this is one of the ways to deal with the delivery systems and logistics. For example, in this particular case, in what is in the zone of special military operation, it's deep in the operational rear, and you don't strike the rail itself. It's useless because it's easily restored. It is called linear target, and so it's really doesn't make any military sense to do it. It was during the World War II, derail all those echelons. No, you just blow up locomotives. And there you go. This was, blown up by UAV of Russians. Somehow they fly that far now, right? So the question here is not actually this. I mentioned already Mr. Donahue. Mr. Donahue is commander of the American forces in Europe. And he is the guy who commanded 82nd, I believe, division in Afghanistan. And yeah, we know its triumphal performance of the US Army in Afghanistan. And those people who have been at that time in Afghanistan while the US forces have been there still, they told me, for example, that, basically they never had any control even over Kabul because Taliban was present even there. They just didn't know that. Or maybe some did, but you remember how they were already lying by 2006 with Washington Post releasing those files. So Mr. Donahue, who is now the commander of, and he talks about this. Look at this. So he talks about it in Wiesbaden on 2 days ago, that Army Europe chief unveils NATO Eastern Flank defense plan. So what defense plan is he talking about? First, you can say that it's defense plan, and obviously it's NATO, it's military alliance, they obviously free to go and discuss whatever they want and make plans whatever they want. But obviously Mr. Donahue comes up with an incredible idiocy, which you would expect from the American general who, Mr. Donahue is part of the plan to counter Russian threats. Well, sure, yeah, why not? And enable scalable global deterrence, the Army and its NATO allies are urgently developing standardized data-driven systems. Well, that's fine. You need data-driven systems. You need to unify them. But it's all just routine work. It's normal for any military. But Mr. Donahue says this. We know what we have to develop, and the use case that we are using is you have to deter from the ground. Okay, he said, the land domain is not becoming less important, it's becoming more important. You can now take down anti-access aerial denying A2AD bubbles from the ground. Well, not for US Army, it can't, but you can now take over sea from the ground. All those things we are watching happen in Ukraine. Well, really, they were happening even before Ukraine, but all right. And so he comes up with a wowzer, which you would expect from people who, graduated West Point and went through the, American stuff and, all kinds of other colleges. War colleges. For example, Donahue noted, Kaliningrad, Russia is roughly 47 miles wide and surrounded by NATO on all sides, and the army and its allies now have the capability to take down that from the ground in a time frame that is unheard of and faster than we ever been able to do. Okay, so this is the guy who actually have been driven out of the Afghanistan and ran. But yeah, sure, it's American general. Yeah, absolutely. He believes all this BS which he spews, and obviously it is for, the chest thumping primarily, because United States doesn't have capability. And of course, if he would study the real warfare, not the thing which, of course, I'll be discussing shortly with you, he would have known that United States have no resources. And the question why it doesn't have resources for that is because it's absolutely not prepared prepared for the modern warfare. But I've been on that for many times. But the point is, there are two domains here. No, I'm not talking about air, space, or air domain, or land domain. No, there are two domains. Civilian, which is PR domain in the United States, where you have to constantly parade yourself as the most powerful, the most finest fighting force, which loses all of its wars, but you have to parade yourself like this. And then, of course, there is the professional domain. And I'll be talking about professional domain because I'm trying to be the professional. I know it's not always comfortable or convenient for many people because you begin to discuss things which otherwise you will not get into. Those entertainment YouTube channels, for example, with people who never served a single day in the uniform and who believe, or some NCO who thinks that, I know how to, run the operations. People do not even understand what operations are. But today we'll try to be professionals, okay? And I will start from the fact that obviously it's a delirium because, if he thinks that he can attack Kaliningrad, I have news for him. He attacks Kaliningrad, Washington, D.C. ceases to exist, together with Mr. Donahue and whatever is dear to him in the continental United States. But evidently he's American general, he doesn't know things, he never studied any real war, all confabulation, and he repeats those platitudes and generalities, so to speak, that nobody is really should be interested in anymore. But here is the thing, what professionals explain to Mr. Donahue, who evidently doesn't read his own Army doctrinal publications, ADPs, which is, of course, field manuals, like FM-3-0 or FM-4. And what can I say? You remember this proverb, obviously, when the amateurs discuss tactics. That's what Mr. Donahue discusses, by the way. It's not even operations. It's for the consumption of the people from New York Times and Washington Post, morons who with the diplomas, degrees in journalism. But when he discusses this, he doesn't discuss operations. And as I already stated, operational planning of the NATO is pathetic. It's just amateurish level. And I know they sour grapes, and we have to state this, I will have to repeat this again. One of the reasons why they make those idiotic statements is because they have sour grapes, they're so losers, and they have a profound, insufferable case of the professional envy and jealousy. But while Mr. Donahue thinks that he can assault Kaliningrad without starting the World War III and then United States essentially ceasing to exist, if it decides to go nuclear, which the only thing United States is capable of, it's not capable of fighting the war in Europe, conventional one. Here what we have to get to some of the delusions of people who, sadly, I have to admit that if you take a look even at the publications from the Academy of West Point, this is Modern War Institute, and as you can see yourself, it's fairly fresh. The main tactical unit, so to speak, the element, if you wish, of the U.S. Army is, of course, the brigade combat teams. And so you have another guy, Joshua Sudhoff, who talks about that, in middle April, which is, basically 3 months ago, about reimagining of the combat power for tomorrow's battlefield, the enhanced brigade combat team. And so he talks about, the World War I and World War II, which are absolutely irrelevant to what we have today because we are looking at the completely new generation of warfare. And he arrives to some really funny conclusions there. And that's, by the way, this also explains why Donahue continues to spew BS. The current Army Brigade Combat Team, BCT, designs infantry, armor, and striker varying their ability to rapidly deploy to a combat zone and then survive. None of them actually can rapidly deploy and survive in the modern combat zone. But this is very interesting what he talks about, that the Army Transformation and Contact Initiative is attempting to address evolving threats. It aims to drive change in this new brigade combat teams design, and that is evident in the light and medium brigade combat team concepts. However, these types of brigades remain purely light infantry equipment with infantry squad vehicles and blah 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 blah. So, and then he talks about that brigade combat teams must be optimized to quickly deploy with the appropriate infantry and armor to provide credible deterrence and on-order combat operations. Future brigades must be able to disperse and survive while conditions are set by division and joint forces and the transition into decisive operations. And here comes the issue. They still believe that they can actually have their forces in the assembly areas and they will not be seen. They will be seen in the deep tactical rear and in the deep operational rear. And no matter what they do, including that, basically transporting things on the rail platforms, as you saw yourself in the beginning, those trains with those armor forces, granted that Russians allow them to provide those forces, and we'll be talking about this today over the Atlantic shipping lanes of communications, they have no chance. They have no chance of survival. And once you disperse them, it doesn't matter how you disperse them. And this is the matter of the basic arithmetics. Because I just want to remind them that Russians produce 600 geraniums a day, per 24 hours a day. So if that doesn't tell them anything, then I don't know. I cannot help them in this respect. And my task here is just to basically to explain to them that they, guys, this is not the war you can fight. You absolutely have no actually capability to fight it. Not to mention the fact that, which I repeat ad nauseam, which is the TOE, Table of Organization and Equipment of the NATO armies, is that from 1990s. 1990. And Russians fight in 2025. So good luck at attacking, obviously, Kaliningrad. And so they talk about that anti-tank missiles like the US produced Javelin and UK made and law showed their effectiveness in the opening months of the Ukrainian war and continue to prove their lethality. No, they don't. But there you go. That's the problem with the American military. They drink this Kool-Aid, which is provided by them, by their best SOBs, which is, of course, completely demolished. I don't know what kind of iteration now. It's Armed Forces of Ukraine, and actually the lethality of javelins and all kinds of NLAWs was measly, pathetic 20%. It's not a good anti-tank missiles. They're not good. But no, these people continue to believe the same as they continue to believe that actually somehow the Patriot factories shoot down Kinzhal's hypersonic missiles. I cannot help here. I have to laugh at that. So, and he continues explaining the problems which the main tactical units which U.S. Army fights with face. And that applies completely to the Donahue statements, idiotic as they are, to Kaliningrad. And so they talk about the current, those teams is not task organized or equipped to optimally fight on the modern battlefield. Well, I have news. They are not equipped to fight on the modern battlefield at all, because United States doesn't have any weapon system which compares favorably to anything what they are trying to, what Russians deploy. In fact, is in terms of long-range fires, United States is not even in the same universe. So, and they talk about this progression, and they think that they're reshuffling same old, those Bradleys, those M1s, which are obsolete tanks and horrible tanks, and how he believes that a reorganization built around existing platforms, Abrams, Bradleys, Bookers, and ISSVs, paired with emergent technologies and trained to leverage joint force and division kill webs would be powerful. No, it will not be, and that's the problem, because you cannot fight with the grossly inferior technology against the I'm sorry, look at the combat record of the Russian army. US army is not even, that doesn't even register there, and so that's the problem. You cannot convince these guys. But here is the more or less public domain. Let's go now back to our proverb of the amateurs talking about tactics, while professionals talking about logistics. We're going to be professionals today. So let's go. This is important documentation. This is a field manual for Europe. It's U.S. Army publication, doctrinal publication, ADP. And as you can see yourself, it's August 2024. And, well, Colonel McGregor already basically went on record yesterday, I believe, and we'll be talking about this too, that United States will run out of all missiles pretty much within the 10 days of the fight with Russians. So, yeah, sure, let the U.S. Army try to fight Russians. But sustainment of the forces. Forget about what is increasing of effort. And increasing of effort is official operational term. You need to increase the effort if you want to go anywhere and to fight and to achieve any kind of the, or attain any kind of the objectives. So as you can see yourself, sustainment operations are critical things. There is no war without it. And so what we have now, look what they write. And once you just go into this document, which is an important document, it is written by professionals, and by professionals who evidently understand things. And look at this. Logistics threats. That's how the United States Army wants to fight Russians. Sustainment commandments and staffs must therefore plan, execute logistics with the assumption that sustainment forces, logistics, people who provide you everything from the toilet paper to medicine, to shells, to rounds, to missiles, to what have you. And so are always under observation, in contact and contested. And believe me, what U.S. Army sees today, and that's why this document dramatically changed. If you look at, unless it is the documents which are from the 2010s with the, finest fighting force in history, suddenly the tone is changed dramatically by professionals. And suddenly we have this sudden use of these peer adversaries. Well, I have news, and I know it sounds horrible, and it's not Russian rah-rah. Actually, United States Army is not the peer to Russian Army. It's near peer, and not very good one at that. But here they say, at least they admit now, that there are peers to all those finest fighting force in history, that peer adversaries possess air, space, and cyberspace capabilities, increasing the likelihood that the threat forces can gain and maintain continuous visual and electromagnetic contact with army forces. Sustainment leaders must assume they are under constant observation from one or more domains and continuously ensure they are not providing lucrative targets for the enemy to attack. You cannot ensure this, period. There will be always lucrative targets, be that, assembly areas, for example, of the brigade combat team or even the divisions. And obviously Mr. Oreshnik will gladly fly into there, and you know what's gonna happen after that. That brigade or that division will cease to exist within like 25 seconds. You can also blow up pretty much every single locomotive park of NATO. So it doesn't matter. Even if you move in column, and that's what you have to do, especially if you want to provide some kind of defensive operations. Guess what? You're going to be seen, and your armor forces will be annihilated. And then, of course, we have sustainment forces must participate being under continuous visual, and they repeat it basically, with contact with adversaries during logistics operations. Yes, they will be completely interrupted. And this is what exactly is happening right now in the essentially special military operation, when that not only logistics is completely, it's not paralyzed. They still try to get things there, but it is horrendously difficult. And then, of course, the most important thing, is United States Army ready to get 36 casualties per day? In reality, it's going to be something on the order of 5,000 plus. United States will be losing a brigade a day at a 24-hour period if it wants to fight with full Russian force. So, and they talk about peer adversaries will deploy persistent visual surveillance. Yes, we know. And logistics operations are subject to adversary influence through disinformation and misinformation campaigns targeting soldiers, their families, and their friends. Oh, welcome to the real war, my friends. Guess what? If hell breaks loose, then no, there will be no their soldiers, their families, and their friends. They will cease to exist, because that's what real wars are. And of course, there is not a single American serviceman who ever experienced anything when their rear, that means their country, is being blown to smithereens. But that's war. I'm sorry, this is the reality, and nothing could be done about it. And so that is why Mr. Donahue probably will have to, try himself elsewhere, not in the command of the forces, which are absolutely not adequate for real modern warfare, let alone fight Russia. And of course, they will be choked logistically. And I will explain to you how it will be happening. And so sustainment forces must understand that the peer adversary can deploy capabilities that may impact logistics operations during competition. A peer adversary's capability to employ effects across multiple domains can disrupt critical infrastructure at home and locations abroad. It's not only can, it will. And there is the issue, actually, how far the United States is ready to go. We're not talking about Europe. Those are basically kamikaze. They will be annihilated, and it's coming. But so they talk about that all domains, which is fine. I mean, it's a professional documents, and it correctly states, stresses that how bad it is. During crisis and armed conflict, sustainment forces should expect an enemy that contests logistics activities in all domains by employing means to detect and rapidly target sustainment forces and resources. Forces and resources that are concentrated and static are easy for enemy forces to detect and destroy. Dispersing these assets has multiple survivability benefits. It also loses the main benefit of the concentrated logistics, which is required if you want to fight a real serious war. So it's not Iraq or Afghanistan, guys, and let me explain why. And before I go, I want to point out an excellent statement by Colonel McGregor, and you have to go and watch it on YouTube with Kim Iverson, where he absolutely correctly stated that, the Pentagon has no strategy, only targets. Exactly. The Pentagon doesn't know what strategy is, and again, they come to think about it, they are not good at operations either. But I want to start with this thing. There is a very popular, I usually don't do this out of the kind of corporate, solidarity, but at some point of time I get sick and tired, and I lose all my patience, and usually I do not do discussion of other resources on YouTube, especially when they talk about Russia and Russian way of war, except for the real professionals. But there is this couple of guys, one of them is H.I. Sutton, and the other Mr. Amik, who runs this thing, Subbrief channel, where they do basically masturbation onto all kinds of the technical things of which they have no clue. I'm talking about Russian and Soviet navies, unlike me, who have a graduate degree in that and experience. But the point is, remember, I will remind you about those two guys, salivating when the outer hull of the Rostov-on-Don diesel submarine was damaged during Sevastopol, and they say, oh yeah, it was destroyed. No, it was not. Rostov-on is back in action, and it actually launches those 3 M14 calibers at targets in Ukraine. But this tells you basically what those people are, and they are not real specialists. They should concentrate on what they know, if they know, US Navy and things like that. They shouldn't go into the Russian naval affairs. They have no clue. And so what I want to show, so this guy, Subbrief, he begins to describe, a couple of days ago, it's popped up, I didn't search it, it popped up in my searches for some reason. So look what this guy does 2 days ago. He talks about the Yasin-class submarines, and obviously, good Lord, he suddenly begins to explain to all people that, oh, look at this P-800 Onyx. So, and developed by Intel, he puts all those data, and people like, oh my God, yeah, that's very interesting. And then he begins to disinform his public. And I understand why he disinformed his public. He's an SEO. He was running some sonar. He wouldn't have a first thing about naval operations, and the fact that he served on some Virginia or Los Angeles class. I mean, many people serve on all kinds of submarines. But the point is, look at this. This is I don't know where he gets his data, but I mean, probably it's the suppressed complex of inferiority, but Onyx, P800 Onyx, doesn't have a max speed of Mach 2.2. Its maximum speed is actually Mach 2.8. And we had writes about that max range of 300 kilometers. I have news for Mr. Amik before he continues to bullshit, pardon my French, his viewers, that he needs to do his homework. For starters, evidently, posting 300-kilometer thing is because, you know what, he doesn't understand and doesn't know about this thing. As you can see yourself, it is Missile Technology Control Regime, MTCR, and this is by the United States Department of State. And as you can see yourself, there is a list of the countries, including the, at that time, Soviet Union and now Russia, who, it's not agreement, it's not treaty, it's just, you know, gentleman's agreement. And this is where this MTCR explains to you where this 300-kilometer range came from. He heard about something that regime places particular focus on rockets and unmanned aerial vehicles capable of delivering a payload of at least 500 kilograms to a range of at least 300 kilometers, and on equipment, software, and technology for such system. So he heard that actually expert variant, which is not even Onyx, it's Yahant, is 300-kilometer range. But let me explain why he is very, very wrong. And this is what I have to constantly express about this type of people. Let me show you something. And good Lord, it's so difficult to explain this for very many people. But if you take a look attentively at 2019, and as you can see yourself, already then the Onyx, and this is, let me remind you again, this was actually 6 years ago. The range of the Onyx was officially confirmed as 800 kilometers. So what can I say? As you can see yourself, 25th of September 2019. And after that, it went into the serial production. And now Russians actually deploying the latest version of Onyx, which has the range of in excess of 1,000 kilometers. So, as you can see yourself, Mr. Amik, the sub-brief guy, he actually decreased the number, the range of the Onyx almost 3 times. Not almost, more than 3 times. And so what do we have then in reality? I want to remind you, remember this scheme? Sometimes people cannot even grasp the reality with. As you can see yourself, the radius, the radii of those red circles are precisely 1,000 kilometers, which tells you this is what the required force, if God forbids the real war starts, and for some reason Mr. Donahue thinks that he will have his shipping lanes of communications open, this is what any Russian submarine deploying to the Atlantic can basically block any kind of the Atlantic shipping lanes of communications. Every logistical support vessel will be sunk, and including the US Navy escorts, which will try to push through. But it was then. Now, as you saw yourself in the last video of mine, we have now the, we know that Zircon has a range of 1,500 kilometers. It's official statement. And then we have now Mr. Krasnikov and the Academy of Russian Science saying that, oh yeah, we have new breakthrough in hypersonic technologies. But the rumors of the latest versions of Zircon and whatever other hypersonic systems which have the Mach 15 probably, more than 2,500 kilometers. So let me explain what a single submarine of the Yasin class with all those missiles can do. Single one. And here it is. This is for you to people who do not understand the scale of things we are talking about. And while I constantly speak about the revolution in military, a real revolution in military affairs. You see this? White one, it's, yeah, that's Onyx, the latest Onyx, which is about 1,000 kilometers. 1,500 kilometers range, as you can see yourself, single missiles. Well, it's actually, you can see yourself how much it covers. And then, of course, if we'll take a look at the latest versions of the whatever Zircon or whatever the new type of missile, as you can see yourself, it covers pretty much most of the Atlantic, and it basically literally plugs completely the shipping lanes of communications in Atlantic, and nobody will really dare there to put any aircraft carrier under the salvo of the hypersonic missiles, because, well, US Navy or US in general has no means to stop anything like this, or for that matter the salvo of the even 4 or 6 Onyx missiles. It is almost impossible. And this is just to give you the explanation of that. And obviously, well, for people who think that, you know what, they have the means now to conduct those patrol aviation and those searches, let me put it this way. You have to look at the probability density in this case. I explained it once at some point of time what probability density is. This is how the searches in anti-submarine warfare are done. As you can see yourself, you can go about it, and you know the things which are darker, they have higher probability density. But what do you do if you have the area with a single submarine which it controls, including the ability to obtain targeting and develop firing solution at the maximum range? What are you going to do with the area which is about, let's say, 9 million square kilometers? Can you imagine what kind of resources you have to have? It's not enough to have the whole Atlantic fleet conducting the search there. They simply have no means to do it. Now imagine if there are 2 submarines like that on the patrol, let alone 3. What do? You can do nothing. And simple as that. That is why I was on record constantly speaking about this, that people sometimes do not understand how things change. That is why Russians are laughing, and I mean it, on Mr. Donahue promised to figure out how to attack the Kaliningrad. Dude, 80,000, the best of the best, creme de la creme, have been killed in Kursk area by Russians on the area of about 159 square miles. So if Mr. Donahue thinks that he can do that and he can sustain his operations, then he has to go back to real military academy and try to learn the real warfare instead of this PRBS, which they continue to press on the unsuspecting American public, which really doesn't want to fight the war. Because if they fight the war with Russia, yeah, it's going to be a catastrophe for the United States, continental United States. And this is just to, you know, how to put it, I don't know how else to explain it other than to show people literally the pictures of the scales of what they are dealing with, and calling out all those so-called, well, how to put it, military professionals on the YouTube who continue to spew BS, and they do not even understand militarily what are they talking about. And so this is what I wanted to show you in terms of what is happening, what is ongoing essentially, and why the United States lost the arms race, and while Mr. Donahue is so unhappy about those, you know, breakthroughs in hypersonic weapons, and that he suddenly recognized that, for example, yeah, the coastal battery of Bastion can sink pretty much, well, what can I say? I don't want to say it, but yeah, carrier battle group. So they better learn the real war, and maybe they will understand now that everything what is happening right now, including Trump, Mr. Trump turning this war into his war, that they better think really hard. What do they want to achieve? But evidently, as already Mr. McGregor stated, and I'm talking about this non-stop, Pentagon doesn't do strategy. They don't know what strategy is. They know that they have, as he correctly stated, they have a list of targets, they bomb it with impunity. This is a totally different situation. In fact, these were Russians who will be bombing the US Army if it decides to assault Kaliningrad with impunity, and that will be it. So this is what I wanted to tell you today, guys, on this Friday. And as always, those who like what I do, please subscribe to my channel. And those who can afford, please support me on Patreon or buy me a coffee too. That would really keep me in business. So have a nice weekend, and I'll talk to you later, guys. Bye-bye.